What if the one thing your dog hopes you will understand has nothing to do with better training, longer walks, or buying the right toys? What if it is something so ordinary that most people overlook it every single day? And what if your dog has been trying to show it to you for years, not because you have been doing something wrong, but because nobody ever taught you how to recognize what you were seeing? The truth is, dogs communicate with us far more often than most owners realize. Not with words, not with dramatic behaviors, but with quiet signals that appear in everyday moments and disappear just as quickly. The surprising part is that these moments are not rare. They happen while you are relaxing on the couch, when you call your dog, when you look at them, when life around them suddenly changes. The signals are there. The problem is that most of us have never learned how to read them. By the end of this video, you may start noticing conversations that have been happening between you and your dog all along. And once you see them, it becomes surprisingly difficult to miss them again. Stay with me, because the fourth insight is the one that changes how many owners understand trust forever. One of the most common moments of misunderstanding happens after a dog does something you do not like. Perhaps they chewed a shoe, jumped onto the couch, knocked something over. You notice it, turn toward them, say their name, and hold a long, steady stare. To us, that look often means you know you shouldn't have done that. It feels controlled, quiet, almost like a conversation without words. But your dog may experience that moment very differently. Among dogs, prolonged direct eye contact is not always a neutral signal. Depending on the context, it can increase social pressure and may make an interaction feel more confrontational. That changes the meaning of the moment. Instead of focusing on what they did, your dog may become focused on you, your posture, your expression, your level of tension, and whether the situation is becoming emotionally uncomfortable. This is often when people notice their dog freezing. The body becomes still. The head lowers slightly. The ears move back. The eyes glance upward without holding relaxed eye contact. Many owners describe this as a guilty look. Behavior specialists often interpret these behaviors differently. They are commonly described as appeasement signals, behaviors that may help reduce social tension and avoid conflict. Rather than admitting guilt, your dog may simply be trying to calm the interaction before it becomes more stressful. That interpretation is supported by research. A study published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior found that dogs use behaviors such as looking away and lip licking during interactions with people, suggesting these signals can function as ways of reducing social tension before a situation escalates. That helps explain why so many of these quiet behaviors appear before a dog ever walks away or becomes obviously uncomfortable. There is a calmer way to respond. Interrupt the behavior with your voice instead of your stare. Guide your dog towards something you would rather they do. Move without looming over them. Give them an opportunity to succeed instead of leaving them to guess how you are feeling. Because dogs learn most confidently when they feel safe enough to pay attention, rather than busy trying to predict whether the next moment will become a confrontation. Have you ever noticed your dog quietly walking over to you while you are reading, watching television, or simply sitting still? They come close. They pause. They sniff your hand, your arm, perhaps your face, and before they can finish, many of us instinctively reach out to pet them. It feels like the kind thing to do. After all, we assume they came looking for affection, but that may not always be why they approached. Dogs experience the world through scent in ways that are difficult for us to imagine. Your scent carries information that changes throughout the day. It may reflect where you have been, who you have been around, even subtle changes in your physical or emotional state. When your dog comes over for one of these quiet visits, they may simply be gathering information before deciding what to do next. It is less like asking for attention and more like reading the room. Many owners accidentally interrupt that process. The moment the dog begins investigating, hands reach out. The quiet interaction immediately turns into petting, talking, or playful excitement. Sometimes the dog accepts it. Sometimes they step away after only a second, not because they no longer care about you, but because the interaction changed before they had finished what they came to do. The next time your dog approaches like this, try waiting for a moment. Keep your hands relaxed. Let them sniff for as long as they choose. You may notice that once they are finished, their behavior becomes much clearer. Some dogs will lean gently against you, some will quietly lie beside you, others will simply walk away, completely satisfied. None of those responses are wrong. The important part is that your dog was allowed to complete the interaction at their own pace. When dogs discover that their quiet ways of communicating are not constantly interrupted, they often become even more comfortable approaching their owners. Sometimes the strongest moments of connection happen after we stop trying to guide every interaction and simply allow our dogs to finish what they started. There is something else we often do without realizing how significant it can feel from a dog's perspective. We change their world without giving them much time to adjust. A new baby comes home. The family moves to a different house. Someone who was always there suddenly disappears from the daily routine. A new pet arrives. Work schedules change. Even a long vacation can transform a dog's everyday life. For us, these events come with explanations. We know why they are happening. We have time to prepare ourselves. Our dogs do not. From their point of view, the world they understood yesterday may look completely different today, and they have no way of knowing whether those changes are temporary or permanent. That uncertainty alone can make life feel less predictable. Research on canine welfare suggests that sudden changes in routine and social environment can affect some dogs' stress levels and behavior, especially when they have little time to adjust. While we cannot explain an upcoming move or a new family member in words, we can help our dogs experience those transitions more smoothly. If you are moving, visit the new neighborhood together before the move whenever possible. If your daily schedule is about to change, begin adjusting your routine little by little instead of overnight. And during periods of change, try to keep the parts of your dog's day that already feel familiar. Meals at regular times, walks they can count on, the quiet routines that remind them life is still predictable. Those simple habits often become anchors when everything else seems to be changing. Most dogs eventually adapt. They are remarkably resilient, but adapting does not always mean they feel comfortable from the very beginning. A little preparation can make that adjustment much easier. Sometimes the greatest source of reassurance is not preventing change. It is showing your dog that even when life changes around them, the relationship they rely on remains steady. Perhaps the most important thing your dog has been trying to tell you is this: every dog has a way of saying, "Not right now," not with words, but through body language that becomes surprisingly clear once you know what to look for. A slight turn of the head, a quick lick of the lips, looking away, leaning back just enough to create a little more space, a yawn that appears in the middle of an interaction, a body that suddenly becomes still instead of relaxed. On their own, these behaviors may not mean very much, but when several of them appear together, especially during social interaction, they can be your dog's quiet way of asking for a little more space or a little less pressure. The difficulty is that these early signals are easy to overlook. A child wants one more hug, someone reaches toward the dog's head, a grooming session continues even though the dog has started pulling away. A visitor keeps moving closer while the dog repeatedly turns its head aside. Most owners are not ignoring these signals on purpose. They simply do not realize their dog has already started communicating. Behavior research has shown that dogs often use subtle signals, such as looking away, lip licking, and changes in posture during uncomfortable social interactions. These behaviors are widely recognized as calming or appeasement signals that may help reduce tension and avoid conflict before stronger reactions become necessary. That is why the quietest signals are often the most important ones to notice. When those early messages are respected, many dogs never need to communicate more forcefully. When they are repeatedly ignored, however, some dogs eventually feel they have no choice but to make themselves understood. That may be barking, growling, or snapping after many quieter attempts have gone unnoticed. The goal is not to avoid every uncomfortable moment. It is to recognize the conversation before it reaches that point. The next time your dog hesitates, looks away, or subtly creates distance, pause for a second before asking them to continue. Watch what the rest of their body is telling you. Give them a chance to choose. Very often, Dogs become more relaxed when they discover that even their quietest forms of communication are noticed, and few things build trust more naturally than a dog learning they do not have to raise their voice to be understood. There is one more thing many dogs need far more than a perfect owner. They need a predictable one, not someone who is cheerful every minute, not someone who never makes mistakes, simply someone whose behavior feels familiar from one day to the next. Dogs pay close attention to patterns. They learn routines. They notice habits. They begin to recognize the rhythm of everyday life. Over time, those patterns help them understand what is likely to happen next. The same is true for the people they trust. When your reactions are generally consistent, your dog learns what to expect. They know how you usually greet them, how you respond when they become excited, how you guide them when they make a mistake. That consistency creates a sense of security. But when the rules constantly change, the social world becomes much harder to understand. Perhaps jumping on the couch is ignored one day, but discouraged the next. One weekend is filled with long walks and attention. The following week passes with almost none. Sometimes a behavior is welcomed, other times the very same behavior is met with frustration. None of these moments seem especially important on their own, but together they can make it difficult for a dog to predict what kind of response to expect. Canine welfare research often emphasizes that predictable routines and consistent interactions can support emotional well-being and help reduce everyday stress in many dogs. That does not mean life has to follow a perfect schedule. Unexpected things happen. Plans change. Every family has busy days. What matters most is that the relationship itself remains dependable. Feed your dog at roughly the same time whenever you can. Keep familiar routines during busy periods. Respond to the same behavior in the same general way. Small moments of consistency often matter more than occasional moments of perfection. Dogs do not expect flawless owners. They simply learn to relax around people whose behavior makes sense to them. And when your dog no longer has to spend energy figuring out what version of you they will meet today, they are free to do something much more important. Enjoy being your companion. If you look back at everything we have talked about, you may notice that none of these ideas are really about teaching your dog new commands. They are about changing the way we notice the dog who is already living beside us. A softer look instead of a harder stare. A little more patience before reaching out to pet them. More preparation when life is about to change. More respect for the quiet signals that say, I'm not comfortable. More consistency in the moments that matter most. None of those things require expensive equipment, none require perfect timing, and none require you to become a professional dog trainer. They simply ask us to pay closer attention, because every healthy relationship depends on communication. The difference is that your dog has been communicating without words from the very beginning. The question has never been whether they were sending signals. The question has always been whether we knew how to recognize them. Once you begin noticing those small moments, everyday life with your dog often starts to feel different. You catch the glance that used to go unnoticed. You pause before interrupting an interaction. You recognize a small sign of uncertainty before it grows into obvious stress. And your dog begins to learn something important as well, that their communication has value, that they do not need to make their signals louder to be understood. Trust is rarely built through one dramatic moment. It usually grows through hundreds of quiet interactions that tell your dog the same thing over and over again. I see you. I understand what you're telling me, and I'm listening. For many dogs, that may be one of the greatest gifts their favorite person can ever give them. If today's video helped you notice your dog in a different way, do not let that understanding end here. The next time your dog walks over to you, pauses before an interaction, looks away, or simply chooses to stay close without asking for anything, take a moment before you respond. Watch first. Then ask yourself one simple question. What might my dog be trying to tell me right now? You may not always know the answer immediately, and that is perfectly okay. Understanding dogs is not about interpreting every movement correctly. It is about becoming curious enough to notice the small conversations that were always there. The more attention you give those quiet moments, the easier they become to recognize. And over time, your dog learns something just as important, that communicating with you is worth the effort, that their signals are seen, that they do not have to repeat themselves louder the next time. Relationships are rarely transformed by one big event. They are shaped by countless small moments that slowly build trust, understanding, and a sense of safety. And sometimes the smallest change comes from us, not because we became perfect owners, but because we finally started paying attention to what our dogs had been saying all along. If one of these ideas made you stop and think, let us know in the comments which one surprised you the most. And if you enjoy learning more about dog behavior and the quiet ways dogs communicate with us every day, subscribe and join us for the next video. The better we understand our dogs, the better life becomes for both of us.